All right, perfect. Okay. Thank you again, like I said, for being here tonight. My name is Maria Elena Zattoli. I'm Assistant Director of Financial Aid at Stockton. I'm also a two-time Stockton alum. And I am very, very excited to be talking to you tonight about financing your Stockton education. It's something I'm super passionate about. I really do love financial aid. I love this aspect of the college process, and educating students and families on it. So thank you for joining me tonight. I know that we're all probably a little bit tired from shoveling so much snow the past couple days. So thanks for taking the time. And also, please excuse me because I am still admitting people in. So if I pause for a second, that's probably why. All right. So what I like to do in these presentations is we do have a wide group of people within this presentation. Um, when I say that, I mean we have students who are thinking of entering in the fall, students who are thinking of entering next spring, and students who are thinking of entering Stockton beyond that. So I like to give a broad overview of the financial aid process, and then I dive deeper into certain aspects. So I like to do this in the form of Q&A where I go over the financial aid that is available and where that aid comes from, how to apply for that aid, and then we will go over in the second half of this presentation costs as well as how to cover those costs. Okay, so some of this information might not be new to some of you, some of it will, but towards the end is where we will really get into going over costs and aid offers. Some of you should have received aid offers already for next fall and spring. So if you have questions about any of that stuff, I'll be happy to answer that at the end. Okay. So getting started, understanding the sources of financial aid. So that is where our financial aid actually comes from. So the sources of financial aid include the federal and state governments, the university, and private entities. So private entities include private lenders, so those who will lend you loans, and they also include those who will give private scholarships as well. Okay, and these sources provide two different types of aid. They provide gift aid as well as self-help aid. So gift aid is grants and scholarships, free money, everybody's favorite kind. So that's money that does not have to be paid back. And then they also provide self-help aid. So this comes in the form of loan options. That's borrowed money that has to be repaid with interest, and then employment opportunities. So working and earning a paycheck. Okay. I also like to dive a little bit deeper into the types of aid that each source actually offers. So the federal government is pretty well rounded. They offer the federal Pell Grant, they offer federal work study, and they offer federal direct loans as well. So they're pretty well rounded in that they offer all different types of aid programs to students. You do, of course, have to meet the eligibility criteria for any of these ones I'm going to mention, but they do offer those programs. The state offers mostly grant programs. They offer the tuition aid grant program. We refer to that as TAG, the Garden State Guarantee or GSG, the Educational Opportunity Fund Grant or EOF, and NJ Stars 1 and NJ Stars 2. You'll notice in financial aid that we use a lot of acronyms. So you'll definitely get used to those, but you will notice there are a lot of different acronyms for things. So the state, mostly grant programs. The university, so here at Stockton, we offer grant programs, including the Stockton Promise, that's based on financial need. And then we offer scholarships, and those scholarships are mostly based off of merit and extracurricular achievement. Okay. And then private aid includes, as I mentioned earlier, private scholarships, private loans. So basically any other aid from any source other than the federal or state governments or the school. Now, what I'm going to do is I am going to go over a few specific aid programs that I want you to know a little bit more about. Okay, so the first one, Stockton scholarships. At Stockton, we reward academic success. Our first-time applicants, we will review your transcript as well as all of the extracurricular activities that you list within the activities section of the Common Application, as well as your student essay and letters of recommendation in order to determine scholarship eligibility. Okay, so we don't just look at transcripts, we don't just look at grades and GPA to determine eligibility. We'll also look at your extracurricular achievement. So your work opportunities, volunteerism and community engagement, your family responsibilities. other school and community clubs and organizations that you're involved in, and other meaningful experiences to you. Because we understand that you're not just your grades. That doesn't make you into who you are. And we really want our students to be well-rounded. So we look at all of those things, like I said, in addition to the student essay and letters of recommendation, just to get an overall picture of who the student is. For our transfer applicants must have 16 or more earned transferable non-basic skills credits from a regionally accredited undergrad institution, and a cumulative minimum GPA of 3.4. So we'll use transcripts from all previously attended schools if there's more than one, to calculate a cumulative GPA. And that's how we determine our transfer scholarships. More information and eligibility criteria for these scholarships is available at stockton.edu/scholarships. Okay. Stockton scholarships continued. So there are a few supplemental first year and transfer scholarships that are supplemental to our merit scholarships. These include our housing scholarship for New Jersey residents, our out-of-state student scholarships, and our international student scholarships. So students have to meet certain GPA, enrollment, and residency requirements to receive these scholarships. So you don't have to apply separately or anything, but you do have to meet certain criteria within your application, and then we'll determine if you're eligible for one of these. So for example, the housing scholarship, students who are from New Jersey are considered for this scholarship. Out-of-state students are considered for the out-of-state scholarships, and international applicants are considered for the international student scholarships. Something important to note with these three specifically is that students have to reside on campus in order to receive them, whereas our other merit scholarships, on-campus housing is not a requirement. And then, of course, more information is available at stockton.edu/scholarships. The next aid program I want to touch on is called the Stockton Promise. This is a really great aid program here at Stockton. What it does is it covers the gap between federal, state, and institutional aid in the form of grants and scholarships and the cost of tuition and fees for qualifying students. So what that means is that we will take the cost of tuition and fees, we'll subtract any other federal, state, or institutional grants and scholarships from those tuition and fees. And if there's anything left that the student would have to pay, the Stockton Promise will cover the gap. So it promises a $0 net price for tuition and fees for qualifying students. So who may qualify are New Jersey residents with 0 to 59 earned credits whose family adjusted gross income is between 0 and 65,000. So if you meet that criteria, then you will be considered for the Stockton Promise. There's no separate application or anything. You'll just fill out the FAFSA or New Jersey Dreamers. You'll fill out the NJ Alternative application, and that is how we determine your eligibility. More information on the Stockton Promise is also available at stockton.edu/promise. Okay, next we have the Garden State Guarantee, which is very similar to the Stockton Promise. It is the state's program, however. They include a few more things in their calculation, but eligibility criteria is very similar. New Jersey residents with 60 to 128 earned credits, so it kind of comes after the Stockton Promise ends, whose family adjusted gross income meets criteria outlined by the state of New Jersey, which is that $0 to $65,000 adjusted gross income for the family. Is considered for the Garden State Guarantee. What the Garden State Guarantee does is guarantees a $0 net price for tuition and fees after all federal, state, institutional, and private grants and scholarships are subtracted from the cost of tuition and fees. So whatever gap there might be, the Garden State Guarantee will cover that gap, similarly to the Stockton Promise. The main difference is that the Stockton Promise doesn't calculate in private scholarships when it comes to determining that amount. So if you're a first year student coming in and you're eligible for the Stockton Promise, we would take that private scholarship and we could apply that to something like housing or meals if you live on campus, or if everything's paid already, then you could use it for books, something like that. Whereas the state actually requires us to count that towards tuition and fees before the Garden State Guarantee. So that's just something to note with that aid program, especially if you maybe come in with the Stockton Promise. There is that little bit of a difference with Garden State Guarantee. But again, no separate application. You are just going to file the FAFSA or New Jersey Alternative application each year to determine your eligibility, or for us to determine your eligibility. And more information is available at stockton.edu/GSG. If you go to our website and you search whatever aid program or just financial aid, a lot of different information, a lot of good information will come up. It's a good search engine where it's not giving you a lot of clutter. It's usually giving you what you're looking for. So definitely take advantage of that. The next aid program that I want to talk about is the Educational Opportunity Fund program. We also refer to that as EOF. EOF in itself is not actually a financial aid program. There are financial aid components to it. In that EOF students do receive the EOF grant from the state and then certain financial supports from the state and the institution. But what EOF does at its core is ensure meaningful access to higher ed for New Jersey residents from backgrounds of economic and educational disadvantage. A lot of EOF students tend to be first generation students whose parents may not have graduated college. So everything's kind of new to them. So what EOF does is provide a lot of those support services to students. A lot of EOF students utilize our student success coaches. So they're able to, kind of talk to them about what's going on. They help guide them with different things throughout school. EOF students also receive free college credits when they attend our interactive summer academy, free calculator rentals. They get to go on field trips and conferences, networking opportunities, different things like that. So there's a lot of good that comes out of EOF. Students will apply again by filing a FAFSA or the New Jersey Alternative application. That's kind of the preliminary application. And then HESA, which is the state of New Jersey, they'll tell us if a student is eligible for EOF, and then the school actually has to take more action to verify the student's eligibility. Okay, so for a student to be considered for EOF, their gross income and assets must fall within the criteria shown here. So for example, if it's a household size of three, the family's adjusted gross income for 2024 for this 26-27 FAFSA cannot be greater than $53,300, and their assets cannot exceed $10,660. And then, of course, add a family member, and it changes a little bit. But that's that criteria. If you do think you may qualify for EOF and you did not indicate on your admissions application that you're interested, please contact Michelle Puerta in admissions. She'll be able to guide you through the process. I'll put her name in the chat later, but if you don't remember her name, you can just contact admissions and ask to speak to somebody about EOF. She's a really great resource, though, and she'll be able to kind of help guide you because there is another piece to it. We have to collect certain tax documentation and things like that to verify eligibility for the program. But it is a really great program, so if you think you qualify, I would definitely inquire about it. Okay, so now I dove a little bit deeper into some of our aid programs. From all the different sources. So now what I want to do is go over how to apply for financial aid. Okay, like I said, I know some of you have done this, but I know some in the audience have not yet. So we will get to costs in just a little bit. Okay. How do I apply for aid? Anybody who is a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen will file the free application for federal student aid, also known as the FAFSA, each year to determine their eligibility for federal, state, and some institutional aid programs. The FAFSA is typically available each October 1st. It was delayed a few times the past few years, just because of the revamps that they were doing with the FAFSA. But this past year, it was actually available a little bit earlier than October 1st. And it is a law now that it has to be available by October 1 each year. So each year, October 1st, mark your calendars, you'll have to do a new FAFSA. Okay. And then New Jersey Dreamer students are not eligible for federal student aid, but could be considered for state aid. So New Jersey Dreamers will actually complete the New Jersey Alternative application at HESA.org each year to determine their state and institutional aid eligibility. So if anybody is a New Jersey Dreamer, you're going to complete that process. I do also just want to note, I mentioned HESA, that is the state of New Jersey. That's the federal student aid of the state, if you will. The Higher Education Student Assistance Authority, they determine a student's state aid eligibility, not only for NJ Dreamer students, but they also determine eligibility for state aid programs for U.S. citizens and eligible non-citizens. So you can't really get away from HESA if you are a New Jersey resident. They are going to determine eligibility for state aid for you. Okay. I like to break this down too. I like to break things down a lot, and I hope that's helpful. So the first step in applying for financial aid is creating a studentaid.gov account, formerly known as an FSA ID. So students and parents will both have to create a studentaid.gov account on studentaid.gov. Parents who already either created one for themselves, for whatever reason, if they went to, going to college and all that, or if they created one for themselves for another student, so another of their children, previously, you're going to use the same one. Um, Students now are going to have to create their own, but parents, you can use the same one if you used one for another child before, and you'll use the same one forever. Something else important to note is that parents without a social security number can create a studentaid.gov account. That's new. They didn't used to be able to do that. They'll just have to go through a separate identity verification process, but they can go ahead and do that and then complete their sections of the FAFSA as well. The reason that both parents and students have to create their own FSA IDs or studentaid.gov accounts is because they'll actually be doing their sections of the FAFSA separately. So you'll need separate logins to do that. So the next step in applying for financial aid is completing the FAFSA. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid, and it's your application for all federal and state aid, as well as some institutional aid programs. Because like I mentioned, we do use that for the Stockton Promise. The FAFSA uses demographic and financial information, including family size and income and assets from the student and family, to determine a student's aid eligibility. The application typically opens October 1st of each year. So those attending in the fall of 2026 or spring of 2027, you will complete the 26-27 FAFSA now. So that's already available. That became available October 1st, 2025. Those attending in fall 2027 or spring 2028 will complete the 27-28 FAFSA beginning October 1st, 2026. I just want to take this moment here because it can sometimes be a little confusing when there's multiple FAFSAs out, which there are multiple FAFSAs out right now. The 25-26 FAFSA is still available, and then we have the 26-27 FAFSA available. Okay. When you look at the FAFSA, you want to think of it in terms of an aid year. So you want to think of it in terms of fall and then spring. So the 25-26 FAFSA was for the fall of 2025 and the spring of 2026. The 26-27 FAFSA will be for the fall of 2026 and the spring of 2027. Okay, so you just want to kind of think of it like that. This way you know you're always doing the right FAFSA. That comes in especially when we have some transfer students who come in mid-year. They might do the next year's FAFSA and not have done the previous one. So just something to remember there. Just a couple things to know before applying. Something new is that you can create your studentaid.gov account and complete the FAFSA in the same day. You didn't used to be able to do that, so that's made it a lot easier. One tip that I do have is that students should always be starting the application and then inviting their parent contributors. Parents can start the application for the student and actually invite the student to finish it. But what we found, and actually federal student aid has kind of also said the same thing that students should be starting it, is because if the student ever has to make any type of correction or go back into the application or anything, it can sometimes mess things up a little. It can sometimes cause glitches and things like that. So it's just easier. We've noticed not as many issues if the student starts the application. So that's just my advice to you if you haven't done so already. So students and parents will complete their their sections of the application separately. Dependent students will add their parents as contributors to their FAFSA by entering their email into the application. Contributors will then receive an email with a code asking them to log into the FAFSA using their own studentaid.gov account. All contributors must complete their sections of the application for a student's FAFSA to be submitted to federal student aid for processing. So in the ideal world, the student starts the application, they finish their part, they invite their parent or parents, depending on the situation, and then the parent gets the email, logs in with their account and the code, and then completes their section. There are some cases where both parents will have to do that, and we'll get into that in a minute. Another super important thing to know is the direct data exchange actually imports tax information into the FAFSA directly from the IRS. So it does take out a lot of the manual entry of data. So it takes out a lot of the potential errors that could be caused, or a lot of honestly the confusion sometimes because tax returns aren't always the easiest thing to read. So it takes all of that out, imports so much of that information directly into the FAFSA. Even if you didn't earn wages or file a tax return in the year that it's asking for, you will have to consent to this process, okay? Because no consent, that means that the student won't be eligible to receive federal student aid, or eligible to receive an SAI. So you want to make sure you're consenting to that. Consenting is very easy. It's just reading through a really long block of information and then selecting I agree. Okay. Something else to note, child support received is reported as an asset on the FAFSA. You're going to report the amount received in the last complete calendar year. Education savings plans for the applicant only are reported as parental assets. So if you have education savings plans, and I'm talking to parents here, if you have education savings plans for other children, you're not going to include them on the one particular student's FAFSA. So you'll only include the savings plan for that student on that FAFSA. Something new, which is it was old and then changed. Now it's going back to the old way. The net worth or value of businesses and farms with over 100 employees has to be reported on the 26-27 FAFSA. It used to be that way for many years, and then they changed it to any business or farm, so with any amount of employees. Now they're changing it back. So with the 26-27 FAFSA, if you have under 100 employees, you do not have to report the net worth or value of your business or farm. After completing the FAFSA, each student will receive their student aid index. This is an indexing number that's used to determine aid eligibility. So it's not the bill, it's not how much the student or parents are going to have to contribute towards the student's education. It is solely an indexing number that schools use to determine aid eligibility. So when you see that, it really doesn't have too much meaning to you. I would say when you're looking at it, the lower the number, and it can go down to negative 1,500, the better chance the student has for need-based financial aid. But it's kind of hard to judge a lot of times. It's really a back end number that the schools will end up using. Some information that we'll need for the 26-27 FAFSA, 2024 income information, so 1040s. Now, the direct data exchange does put a lot of this information into the FAFSA already. However, there are certain situations where it can't do that. It can't pull in that information. In the case where a parent was married in 2024 and now they're divorced or separated, but they filed a joint return in that year, it's not going to pull that data in because it's not going to be accurate anymore. So some manual input will have to be done, and then the schools will actually go in and review that data to make sure that it's correct. A lot of times what we find in those situations is that parents will end up putting more than they should have, say, for tax stuff like that. So the schools will review that anyway, but 2024 1040s, W-2s, 1099s, always good to have that stuff on you, just in case you need it. And then, as I mentioned, records of child support received the last complete calendar year. And then they're going to want current balances of cash savings and checking accounts and the current net worth of investments, businesses, and farms. Investments is any investment, and then businesses and farms is, like I said, with over 100 employees. Now I quickly just want to go over which parents are reported on the FAFSA, because for some students, the situation can get a little bit more complicated. All situations are different, so I wanted to go over this piece. The first scenario that I want to go over is parents are either married or they're unmarried and they live together. Okay, in that case, both biological or adoptive parents are reported on the FAFSA. Something to note is that only parents are reported on the FAFSA. So if a student has legal guardianship with someone, that's a question on the FAFSA that they'll check off, and they could end up being an independent student. But say somebody has custody of the student or something like that. Grandparents don't go on the FAFSA, siblings don't go on the FAFSA. It's only biological or adoptive parents. Okay. In this next situation where parents are divorced or separated, the custodial parent is the parent who's reported on the FAFSA. And the custodial parent is the parent who provides more than 50% of the student's financial support. If both provide equal support, The parent with the greater income and or assets is going to be reported. If parents are divorced and the custodial parent is remarried, both the custodial parent and the step parent's information is reported on the FAFSA, even if the custodial parent and their new spouse were not married in the tax year the FAFSA uses. So that does trip some people up as well. But if the custodial parent is remarried, then that spouse, their information is also required on the FAFSA. There are some unusual circumstances where students are not able to provide parent information. So those who select that they have an unusual circumstance on the FAFSA, they'll be able to complete their application without parent information, and they'll receive what's called a provisional SAI. What this means is just kind of like a temporary SAI until it's determined whether the student is actually independent or not. So each school has to determine through documentation if the student's situation warrants the independent student status. If it doesn't or it can't be proven, then the student will have to update the FAFSA and provide parent information. Okay, the next step after applying, doing the FAFSA and all that, which I would say is the hardest step, although it's not super hard for everybody anymore, because of all the changes that they made. Sometimes it can be a little more difficult, and we're here to help. But this is probably one of the easier steps, is determining state aid eligibility. So I mentioned HESA earlier. Any New Jersey resident who attends a New Jersey college or university will be considered for state financial aid programs. The state of New Jersey HESA will automatically get a copy of the FAFSA, and then they will determine state aid eligibility that way. It's always recommended to students that you create an NJFAMS account. That would be at njfams.hesa.org. That's where you're going to be able to log in and actually see your state aid eligibility, and submit any additional documentation if they do request it. And that actually brings me into the next piece of this, which is complete outstanding requirements. So each year you're going to file the FAFSA or the NJ alternative application. But that's not it. You could end up being selected for a review of something, whatever it might be. And that would mean that you have to provide additional documentation to either the school or the state of New Jersey. So we will always send you emails, texts, all kinds of things letting you know if you have outstanding requirements. We do that for federal aid as well as for the state. You'll also get emails from HESA and things like that, though. It's important that students are monitoring their emails and making sure that anything financial aid related, they're either reading it, forwarding it to parents, whatever the case is, because aid is not guaranteed if there are outstanding requirements. So we need to make sure that everything is completed to receive whatever aid we may be eligible for. Okay. So like I mentioned, we do send out emails, but those emails are all going to direct students into the Go Stockton portal. So this is a screenshot of the financial aid tab of the Go Stockton portal. And in the lower left here, you'll see the financial aid requirements button there. So you'll click on that, and then you'll be able to view and complete any financial aid requirements. And of course, we're always here to help if you have questions. This is a screenshot of HESA's website. So you will, like I said, it's recommended you create an account. But if you do have requirements, then you will have to create an account, and that's where you'll be able to view those requirements and upload them there. Okay, that was the whole financial aid process from the beginning. Now we're going to talk about costs and how to cover those costs. So I know that a lot of you have hopefully received your financial aid offers. Parents, if you haven't seen them, check with your student, because we did email a lot of them out within the last couple weeks. If we have your FAFSA and if you've been admitted, of course, that is when we send out an aid offer. So check your emails, and we are going to go over costs now. All right. So now that you've applied, let's talk costs. The cost of attendance is something that I wish they would have renamed in the whole FAFSA simplification thing, where they updated the FAFSA and made it a little simpler. They didn't, but what the cost of attendance is a combination of direct costs. So you can think of direct costs as things like tuition and fees, housing and a meal plan. These are things that the university is actually going to bill you for. So you can think of direct costs kind of as your bill. and indirect costs. So, indirect costs include things like books and supplies, transportation, course materials, miscellaneous expenses, things like that. These are things that the university will not actually bill you for, but costs that we want you to think about because you could end up incurring them as a result of going to school. Most of the time, you're going to need to purchase books for class. If you're commuting, you're going to need to purchase gas, things like that. That's all built into that cost of attendance. The cost of attendance itself is not necessarily what it's exactly going to cost you to attend. It's an estimate. Um, but we do give you that to kind of give you the entire picture. So a lot of times what students and families want to really look at are those direct costs. How much am I going to end up having to pay Stockton, right? So bills don't come out until you're registered for classes, so they won't come out until for the fall, July, or later if you register for classes after that. We will have a bill estimator updated though, so you can view an estimate of the bill there. But your financial aid offer will give you an estimate of the cost of attendance in total, which includes those direct costs as well as the indirect costs. Okay. Something I wanted to bring up, this is part of our financial aid offer. So it will go over what it costs to attend. So we have direct costs there, including tuition fees, housing, and food. Now, like I mentioned, those are all estimates. They could change a little bit, but they're pretty good estimates for what it would cost for next academic year. Okay. And then we also give you information on how much free money you could receive. So information on any grants or scholarships that you may be eligible for. We will total that in the free money section. And then next, at the very top there, you see the total direct costs, which, like I said, direct costs would be an estimate of what your bill would be for the year. We do bill per semester, so getting into how to pay those, we'll talk about that. But that is for the year. You'll subtract the free money, and then your direct net costs are going to be an estimate of what you may owe the university after any aid is applied. Okay. Then we'll give you what other expenses you should budget for, so those indirect expenses. So when you look at that total estimated cost of attendance, it seems a little higher, and that's because it includes those indirect expenses, okay? So if you really want to get an idea of what it may cost to attend the university, just what you would end up paying, either in, out of pocket or with loans or things like that, you want to look at those direct net costs above. But to get an idea of the whole picture, we'll go into the cost of attendance there, which is that total estimated cost of attendance. Then you subtract the total free money, you get the total net cost. Okay, and then we'll also give you other options to pay those expenses. So we will always take out the free money and do that math for you because free money is accepted automatically for you once you enroll. We don't assume that you want it, or we do assume that you want it. So we'll just do that for you. But any loans or anything like that, you actually have to take action on that stuff to say that you do want that. But we do give any loan eligibility within the financial aid offer as well. Okay, this is just another illustration of the cost of attendance. So you have your direct costs, you have your indirect costs, and then you have your financial aid. Financial aid for most people doesn't cover the entire cost of attendance or even direct costs for the most part. There are some lucky few, but most have a gap they have to cover. Okay, so how are we going to cover the gap? How are we going to cover those costs? So after determining costs and subtracting financial aid, we can determine how much additional funding is needed, and we call that the gap. So there's several ways to fill the gap, and I'll go into detail on a lot of these different ways. But the first one is reducing your costs. The second one is scholarships. Then we have saving and making payments and borrowing. Okay. Reducing costs. One of the best ways to reduce your gap is to reduce your costs. It's not always an option for everybody. But there are certain little things that we can do. Especially now, my best example is like going to the grocery store anymore. You'll look and you'll have bought a few things and nothing's more than like $10, but you end up spending a couple $100 because everything's really adding up. It's the same way when we're subtracting. So anything that you are cutting is going to end up adding up and saving you a good amount of money. So consider the following options. Maximizing your credits. Stockton has a flat rate tuition. So you can take between 12 and 20 credits during the academic year for the same price. Typically, you want to take 16 credits per semester. That is what's going to get you to graduate within your 4 years if you start out as a first year student. Um, the 20 credits could end up helping you graduate early. You could also look into summer classes and things like that. Um, and, all of that could end up helping you graduate early, which of course would end up saving you money. Choosing a cheaper option and things. So is there a cheaper housing option? Is there a cheaper meal plan option? Are you able to commute instead of living on campus? Look into renting textbooks instead of buying them. So those are all just little things that could end up making a big impact on your costs. Your education is really an investment. You are investing in yourself, but you want to make sure that you are responsible about it and you know that anything you borrow, say you're going to be able to pay back, or you don't want to go spend your whole savings on everything. Just things like that. You have to really take a lot into consideration, which is a lot for students. So it's very important that, family and friends and all that are able to support them, and that's what we're here for as well. Um, Next thing I want to talk about, scholarships. This is one of my favorite topics because I don't think that students take advantage of these enough. So above and beyond the admission scholarships that I talked about, there are also a lot of private scholarships out there as well. Where can we find these? Local organizations, for example, local Rotary clubs. The student on the left there applied for a scholarship with his local Rotary club and received a laptop. So that cut down on that indirect expense. He didn't have to go and buy a laptop for himself. He was able to receive that and use that for school. Scholarship search sites are a good one. So FastWeb is a great resource. If you go to that website, you can search for scholarships for anything. There's scholarships for left-handed people. There's scholarships for anything you're interested in, any activities you participate in, volunteer work, all of that. There are a lot of different scholarships out there, so please take advantage of those. This is definitely work. It's not easy, but nothing in life, unfortunately, is really truly free. So you do have to put in the work, but it could end up really benefiting you if you do that. Okay. High school guidance counselors are another great resource. I'm also going to say community college, like preceptors or advisors, are also great resources because they may know of scholarships that are out there for students as well. But a lot of local organizations will go to the high schools and let guidance counselors know about scholarships that are available, and they want those high school students to apply for those. So I would definitely have students be asking their guidance counselors now about those. This is like kind of the time of year where it starts ramping up, because there are a lot of great opportunities that not a lot of students take advantage of. And then students or their parents' employers. So this student on the right there, she worked at Chick-fil-A and she applied for a scholarship from them and received, I believe it was a $25,000 scholarship. That is obviously very generous. Not everybody is as generous at Chick-fil-A as Chick-fil-A, but there are definitely scholarships out there, especially with employers that some students might not know about because they haven't taken advantage of it. They haven't asked. So that's definitely a good resource. Ask your employers, part-time employers, all of that if they have anything like that. Some employers will also have tuition programs where students end up getting reimbursed for some of their tuition through those programs as well. So there are programs out there to help students get their college degree. And then I've also seen students come in with scholarships from their parents' employers as well. So parents, if you're able to ask HR, see if your employer offers anything for your students. Could be a simple application, and asking never hurts. The worst they can say is no. Next, I wanted to bring up Stockton Foundation scholarships just because once students have a Stockton GPA, they're able to apply for our foundation scholarships. What those are hundreds of different scholarships, hundreds of different donors come to Stockton and say that they want to offer Stockton student scholarships. So we have one application for all of those scholarships, and the committee gets together and they determine eligibility. So the amounts range from a couple $100 to a couple thousand. Students can also receive more than one. So those are great opportunities once the student becomes a Stockton student. You should still look into these as well, even when students are here at Stockton. But that is another great resource as well. All right, this one's kind of an obvious one, probably one you hear all the time, but I do like to mention it. I don't want to leave it out. Saving and making payments. So if you haven't already, like students, if you have a part-time job or something, or whatever the case, start saving now because any contribution that you can make towards your education now will save you money later. So working a part-time job could help you cover some of your expenses. Stockton bills per semester as well, and we do offer payment plans of up to 5 payments each semester. So take advantage of those to make payments towards your bill as well. So say, your bill is, I'm just going to make this an easy number. Say your bill is $5,000 and you can afford to pay $1,000 throughout the course of the semester. You could borrow the other four and then make your payments for that $1,000. So it'd be divided into five. So you'd have $200 payments each month. So definitely something to think about because something like that could be more manageable, and it'll end up saving you money because anything you borrow, you're going to repay with interest. So it's going to cost you more than what you borrowed. So just something to think about. And then probably my favorite topic, which some people think it's kind of crazy, but I love talking about borrowing. I love talking about loans because it is it's a big thing. It's a common thing that a lot of students have to borrow, in order to attend school. I would say majority of students end up borrowing to help cover the cost of their education. Um, some of the different types of loans that are available include federal direct loans. So typically students are eligible for federal direct loans through filing the FAFSA. They could be eligible for subsidized loans, and unsubsidized loans or solely unsubsidized loans. Those depend on financial need, which is again part of that FAFSA calculation. Everyone's eligible for the same amount in loans though. So your first year students are going to be eligible for $5,500 in federal direct loans. Then second year students will be, as long as you meet the credit criteria, you have to be a sophomore, would be $6,500. And then juniors and seniors or beyond that, we're looking at $7,500 per year, which is not enough usually to cover everything. But I'll talk about why it's important. Interest and all that usually you're going to want to accept those loans before looking into any private loans or anything like that. So the next thing, of course, is private loans. Those are going to be loans with banks, credit unions, anybody who will lend to you, really. So sometimes students will have to apply for private loans where they are the borrower, but a lot of times they'll need a credit-worthy cosigner in order to obtain a loan like that. The next option is called the Parent Plus loan. If anybody has borrowed a Parent Plus loan previously, you'll be grandfathered into the old way of doing things, but starting July 1st of 2026, Parent Plus loan borrowing is changing. So the new annual limit for a parent to borrow is $20,000 per child. So you can only borrow up to $20,000 per child per year. And there is an aggregate limit per child as well. So not necessarily per parent, there's not an aggregate limit. So if you have 10 children, you could borrow $65,000 per child if you wanted to. But there is an aggregate limit per child, and that is the 65,000. So if you do the math, if your child goes to school for 4 years and you borrow the maximum at 20,000 per year, that last year you're going to run out. So you really need to make sure you're calculating things correctly. And that's where our financial aid office comes into play as well, because we can really help guide you in things like that. Okay. The most important thing with borrowing is not to be afraid of borrowing, just to be informed and to be responsible about it. Understanding interest rates and repayment, not over borrowing. These are things that are really, really important because, as I said earlier, attending school and going to obtain a degree, you're really investing in yourself, for the future. And you do have to put something out to be able to invest in yourself. But you want to make sure that you're doing that responsibly and you're not biting off more than you can chew. And part of like that cost of attendance I talked about earlier kind of helps with that because you can't borrow more than the cost of attendance. So you can't just go out and get a loan for $100,000 every year. That's not exactly how it works. Um, but your goal should end up being to borrow the least amount possible. Um, you know, and then that'll end up hopefully getting you to where you want to be. Okay. I like to give this example for borrowing because I feel like some students and families don't quite understand the impact of those of interest and how those federal direct loans work. So here's my example. Your total costs for the year are $30,000, but you received $10,000 in free money. You're unable to make payments, so now you need to borrow the rest, which would be $20,000 in loans. So we have $20,000 minus that $5,500 in federal direct loans that you're offered. So now you need to borrow $14,500 in a private loan. We're assuming the student's parent is not borrowing the Parent Plus loan. $5,500 at the 6.39% interest rate will cost you $7,457.28 over 10 years, which is the standard repayment for those federal loans. $14,500 at a 9.99% interest rate, which I kind of tried to calculate the middle ground. There are interest rates that are a lot higher in education loans, and then there are a few that I'll say a few that are lower than that. But majority of students are seeing interest rates that are there or a little bit higher. That'll cost you $45,770.67 over 30 years. Of course, if you repay that in less time, you'll end up paying less. But sometimes those monthly payments can be pretty high. So you may have to lengthen the time. Okay. That's just what I did for this example. So your total to repay here is $53,227.95. A lot of times I'll have students and parents come to me and say, I don't want to borrow multiple loans. I only want to borrow one loan. Okay. If you borrow one loan for that $20,000, you'll have to borrow the private loan at that 9.99% interest rate. That will cost you $63,131.95 over 30 years. The difference there is $9,904. So just by borrowing a different loan or just by borrowing everything in one loan, you're paying almost $10,000 more because of that interest. The interest in $5,500 over that period of time. So just something to think about. My point in showing you that is to help you understand, you want to look for the lowest interest rate as possible. You want to be able to pay as much as you can out of pocket so you don't have to borrow it. You want to borrow the loan, even if you borrow multiple loans. Like this, you want to make sure that you're doing things like that in order to save you money. And we're able to kind of help guide you in things like that. We can't tell you which loan to go with or anything for a private lender. We're not allowed to do that, but we can kind of help you understand, all of this because it is a lot. So I hope that that example helped a little bit. All right. I'm pretty much wrapping up my chatting part of the presentation. So this is our social media platforms. We do have Facebook, Instagram, and X. So if you'd like, you can follow us at Stockton FinAid for some tips, tricks, and reminders. We put out a lot of good information on there. Like I said, just reminders of different deadlines and information you have to be aware of because once you are eligible for financial aid, you have to maintain that eligibility. So different things like that. So it's a good thing to follow if you would like. We also tweet scholarship opportunities. I guess we still call it tweet, even though it's X now. We still tweet scholarship opportunities, though. So that's a good reason to follow that as well. And then on here, I wanted to list some helpful resources for you guys. So helpful resources for federal student aid. So the website and the phone number there, state aid, and then our financial aid office as well. There's our website, phone number. We do schedule phone appointments with students and families. You can also always just walk into our office during business hours. Or if you see us at like an open house or something like that, we'll be there to answer your questions. But if you want to schedule a one-on-one phone appointment, you can absolutely do that, and we will assist with whatever questions that you have. All right, and then if you haven't done so already, make sure that you do apply. We would love to have you. You can apply as a first year student or transfer student at stockton.edu/apply. And then, in addition, also feel free to visit us. We have a Discover Stockton Day open house on Saturday, March 21st. That's going to be a great event. You can really get to know Stockton and all of the wonderful things that we have to offer. Anybody who is an admitted student will also have an admitted students day. That's at the end of April. That is an invitation only event, so you'll get an invitation to that. And anybody who just wants to visit campus, if you want an in-person tour. You can always go to stockton.edu/visit and schedule that, and we would love to see you. All right, so now I am going to stop sharing my screen here, and I am going to check the chat and then answer those questions live. And then I will also allow if anybody wants to unmute or anything, you can absolutely do that, and we will answer your questions. Okay. So the first question I see here says, does my daughter have to accept her offer in order to have a portal and look at these tabs? She has not yet chosen her school. No, she does not have to accept her offer. She doesn't have to submit a deposit or anything. Once a student's admitted, they automatically get access to the Go Stockton portal. In their acceptance packet from admissions is actually their login credentials. If for some reason you lost that or don't have that anymore, you can always contact our IT department, and they'll be able to help the student reset that stuff. And then you'll be able to log into there and view requirements. You can view the aid offer in a different view. And then, yeah, you'll get access to all of that stuff. So, no, you do not have to definitively say you're attending Stockton to see all of that. When can we expect to see a complete financial aid summary award packet? That answer kind of depends on when you were admitted and when you filed the FAFSA. So we have started sending out aid offers to new first year and transfer students for the fall of 2026. If you feel like it's kind of been a lot of time since you filed the FAFSA and you were accepted, and you haven't gotten anything yet, please feel free to reach out and we can look into why. Also, just in case, check like your spam folder. Just in case anything went to there, but you should get an email and a text message. And when I say you, I'm speaking to the student because typically we'll send all of our communications to the student's Go Stockton email as well as the email listed on the FAFSA. Okay. So all of this is going to the students. So parents, pressure your students to either forward anything for financial aid to you or just look out for it. So yes, if you feel like it's been a lot of time, please feel free to reach out to me. Here, let me actually, right now, I'm going to put my email in the chat. And then anybody with any, like if you have personal questions or, things like that, please feel free to reach out to me. Here we go. Okay. My next question here is, why does it only show free money on the financial aid offer and not housing or merit? So the financial aid offer should include scholarships. If it didn't and you were offered scholarships through admissions, like your acceptance packet would have listed any merit and the housing scholarship or anything like that, please contact me and I'll look into why it didn't include that. I know that we did have some go out that didn't include them. There was a little bit of a glitch between systems where one wasn't communicating to the other, but that should be fixed now. So if that wasn't included, reach out to me. Are award packets sent at a different time if the student is transferring from another school? No, they should be sent within the same. The only ones who are a little bit later, hopefully this week or next week, are going to be our continuing students. If you were previously admitted to Stockton and attended Stockton, you're considered a readmitted student, and then that's a little bit different. You're offered aid with continuing students. But no, they're offered at the same time. Can you appeal if not offered free money? It depends. So you can definitely contact admissions if maybe the student's GPA went up or they ended up participating in additional extracurriculars that maybe they didn't mention on the common application. You can definitely reach out to admissions for that, and I will put their email. All right. For information on merit-based scholarships and appeals for things like that. But as far as free money through the FAFSA, so federal, state, and institutional grants, that stuff you have to meet certain criteria. So appeals can be for things like unemployment or loss of unemployment benefits, a one-time occurrence of, say, you have like gambling winnings or things like that. There are certain situations if a divorce or separation or death of somebody occurred after the FAFSA was filed, things like that, those would warrant appeals for federal, state, and institutional grants. Um, but otherwise, if you don't meet any of those criteria, then no, you wouldn't be able to appeal those because they're very specific. You have to meet certain criteria. But what I will do is, if you go to stockton.edu/appeals, you'll be able to view the income adjustment appeals, and you'll be able to view what qualifies for an income adjustment appeal. Okay, next question we have here. If our FAFSA changed due to recent awarding of disability, does that need to be changed at Stockton? Already admitted. So I would want a little bit more information on this. Awarding of disability, meaning like you now receive disability from the state. Maybe in 2024 you were working and now you're on disability. That could be something that we would look at for an appeal, because maybe you were making more in 2024 and now on disability you're not making as much. So we would definitely look at something like that for an appeal. Our appeals should hopefully be open. I want to say within the next 6 weeks. On that stockton.edu/appeals webpage, that's where we'll announce that appeals are available, and then the student will be able to go there, and the parent and the student can work together, but the student will have to submit the appeals on their account. Okay, so something to note there as well. If you have any questions or anything when submitting appeals, because it is specific documentation that we're looking for, and we try to list that out on the website. But if you have any questions, please feel free to call, make an appointment with us, because sometimes appeals can be a little bit of a back and forth if the correct documentation is not submitted. So we want to make sure that you're submitting everything, that we're looking for. Okay. My next question is, hi, if I received my financial aid packet already and the Stockton Promise was not on it, does that mean I didn't receive it? Also, if I submitted my EOF, how long would it take to get a response back? There's also a submit button on the financial aid packet. If I were to submit, does that mean the financial aid packet will not be adjusted? Okay, I'll take this one at a time. If the Stockton Promise was not on it, you wouldn't be eligible, no, but I mean, I don't want to necessarily say that for sure. I'd like to look at your FAFSA specifically. If you don't meet the 65,000 or below, income criteria, then no, you're not going to be eligible for it. It should be on there if you meet that criteria. So that's something that I would want to look at for you. So if you can send me the student's ID number by email, that would be great, and then I'll look into that. Submitting your EOF application, how long would it take to get a response back? I know that they're actively reviewing those. If you would like, you can, let me put this in here. You can email Michelle in admissions. I'm sorry, I can't talk and type at the same time. Okay. Michelle Puerta, she kind of leads EOF in admissions. So please feel free to reach out to her to check on the status of your application. I do know that they are reviewing them. But if you have any, timeline questions and things like that, I would refer those to Michelle. And then no, if you accept look, you're not gonna have to accept any free money that's on your financial aid offer. So anything like Pell, Tag, GSG, Promise, anything like that, scholarships, that's all accepted automatically for you. Anything that you're taking action on the financial aid offer, that would be loan funding. You can definitely do that now, but you don't have to. You can wait if you would like. But if you're certain that you're coming to Stockton, then you can go ahead and do that if you want to just kind of get the ball rolling on that. And then also you can submit your enrollment deposit. There is a link on the offer to do that, but you don't have to right at this moment. Okay. Sorry, I lost my place, so give me 1 second. I apologize. Okay. Is the money awarded from HESA different than the actual financial aid? So HESA awards state aid. So state aid would be the tuition aid grant, the Garden State Guarantee, EOF. So it's not different, it's just in combination with. So you can receive state aid, you can receive federal aid, you can receive institutional aid. So it's just in combination. So your financial aid offer that you receive from Stockton should include whatever financial aid the state said that you're eligible for. How does the work study process work? My child can apply for a job and how much can be awarded to offset the tuition? Okay. Work study is a very limited program. The funding is very limited for work study. Um, It goes to continuing work study students first. The federal government did just cut work study funding even more this past year. But work study students do graduate, and some work study students don't want the funding. So they come back and they say they don't want it. So then we award it to new students. New students will be able to indicate their interest in the program if they're not automatically offered work study on our work study page. So if you just go to stockton.edu and search federal work study, there will be a link for that there soon. The 26-27 link is being worked on right now, but that will be there soon, and then students can actually indicate their interest for the program there. I believe that it was $1,500 a semester this year. So that's how much is offered to work study students that way. I think there was another part of this question, and I apologize. I'm trying to admit people in the waiting room as well. Um, Another important thing to note with work study, though, is that work study funding will never be applied to the bill. So the students will work and they'll earn a paycheck throughout the semester. So they'll get paid biweekly, just like employees at Stockton. Um, Sometimes students and families get discouraged if they're not receiving work study. Some students will qualify for it and they won't receive it because it's such a program with limited funding. One thing I do want to note is there are offices on campus that will hire students out of their budget. Um, so there are definitely a few out there. If you utilize our stockton.edu/handshake platform, you can actually search for non-work study jobs. And then they will they'll kind of filter them out for you and you'll be able to look um, to see. And you could actually earn more as a non-work study employee. Because work study, you're limited to that specific cap per semester, and you're not limited to that as a non-work study employee. So that's also something to think about as well. Somebody else asked, do we apply for new private loans every school year since we don't know how much we will need to borrow each year? Yes, you will not borrow multiple years of loans within the same year. You're going to borrow each year once it comes. So like you would only borrow for the 26-27 year. And you would probably do that starting in like May. I wouldn't apply for any private loans now because they're credit based and credit checks will expire and then we can't certify loans if that happens. So it becomes this big mess. So I would say beginning in May is when I would start applying or at least looking for any private loans if you're going to do that. And yes, you will do it for that year specifically. You will go off of an estimate of what you think the bill will be with the bill estimator. Or you can wait until bills come out, but depending on the timing of that, it gets a little tight because sometimes quite a few people do that. And then it becomes an overload for our office because everybody's doing it within, the 4 weeks between when the bills are viewable and when they're due. So my best advice would be use the estimator, borrow a little more than you think you might need because we can always reduce a loan for you. And then this way, if it comes time where the bill is due and you borrowed more, then it looks like your bill is covered, right? Because that funding doesn't actually get sent to the school until October for the fall and February for the spring. So we have wiggle room to be able to then go and say, hey, we only want, this much of this loan, we don't want the rest. And then we can go ahead and adjust it for you. But we can never increase a loan to more than what you're approved for. Okay, because you're only approved for a certain amount. Okay. Hi, I was wondering what the difference between direct net cost and total net cost was. So your direct net cost is only going to include direct costs, and then it subtracts that free money that you're eligible for. So it'll be tuition fees, housing and meals, minus any free money. That's your direct net cost. The total net cost should actually be, total net cost should be including indirect expenses. Yeah. So direct net cost is going to be your direct costs minus any free money, and then that's what you're going to end up having to cover. That's typically what I recommend looking at. But when it comes in terms of like borrowing and things, you can borrow up to like the cost of attendance and things. So if you need additional funding for books and stuff like that, you can do that, and that's where that cost of attendance kind of comes into play. So it's kind of a scary number, but it kind of helps you too a little bit. Okay. Financially, everything has changed for us. How do I update and how can I get a one-on-one conversation to help with everything? Okay, it kind of depends on your situation. Um, but we can definitely schedule an appointment to discuss things changing if they're employment or divorce or something like that. Um, you may qualify for an appeal. So what I'll do is if you go to stockton.edu/contact FinAid. That is where you can schedule an appointment, one-on-one phone appointment with a financial aid counselor. And then we would actually be able to, we would call you and then we would go over any questions that you have. Go over your situation, what documents you might need to submit if you do qualify for an appeal, things like that. So we'd be able to kind of counsel you on how to move forward. So for foundation scholarships, you have to have a Stockton GPA in order to apply for those. So if you are transferring in for the fall, or just your first year student for the fall, after that first semester, you'll have a Stockton GPA. And when the application opens for the 27-28 year, that'll open in January of 2027, you'll be able to apply for those. So students entering for the 26-27 year will not be able to receive foundation scholarships in 26-27, but you can apply within that year to receive them for 27-28 and going forward each year. And then also if you continue on for, say, graduate school, you can still apply for them for graduate school as well. I do just want to reiterate financial aid offers are going out. Um, they have started, so please have your students keep an eye out in their email. If they haven't gotten anything, please feel free to reach out to me if you feel that they should have at this point, and then I can look into maybe why they haven't, or we'll go from there. I have another question about cost of attendance. So this person's asking, what is the total net cost meaning after all aid? So total net cost, let me pull up the aid offer here actually, so I can see exactly what everybody's saying. Total net cost. Okay. Total net cost includes those indirect expenses. Okay. So total net cost is going to be your total estimated cost of attendance, which includes your direct costs like tuition fees, housing, and meals, and then your indirect expenses. So things we're estimating for, like books, supplies, course equipment, transportation to get to campus, miscellaneous expenses, all of that lumped together. Okay. And then subtracting total free money. Okay. So this is not what you're going to owe the university. If you want to look at what you're going to owe the university, or, estimated what you're going to owe the university, you want to take your total direct costs, subtract your total free money, and that's where you get your direct net costs. Okay. So total net cost and direct net cost are different. When do we need to accept the federal subsidized and unsubsidized loans by? There's not a specific time frame. I mean, you have through the academic year, really, to accept them. Um, Having them in place by the time bills are due and everything, I would say by at least mid-June. I would accept them, do the requirements, and then get your either payment plan set up, private loan set up, Parent Plus loan, however you're going to cover whatever gap. This way, there's time for everything to be processed because one of the mistakes a lot of students make is they just say, okay, well, I accepted the loans, so they should now be on my bill. There are other requirements that students have to complete. They're going to get the loans, but they have to do entrance counseling, which is like an introduction to borrowing course, and they have to do a master promissory note, which is a signed agreement that they'll repay the loan. Those they can do them in one day, but they're done on studentaid.gov, which then takes 1 or 2 business days to send that information to the school. And then we have to do our processes. So once you accept loans and you do those requirements, it can take 3 to 5 business days now, and during peak times, at least, 5 to 7 maybe. So it's not just like an immediate thing. So give us some time, but I would say like beginning to mid-June is a good time frame to shoot for. And also, just so you know, if you do accept those loans and then you end up not needing them or not wanting them, we can always cancel them for you. After disbursement, then you'll have to end up, well, we could cancel them for you if you're not getting a refund. But it gets a little trickier, so I'd want to like have a deeper conversation about that. Um, okay, let's see. Next. Could we contact the school to find out what the payments would be on a payment plan? That is specific to our offer letter. Um, what the payment plan will end up doing. I mean, we can go over it. Our office doesn't actually do the payment plans. It's called the Bursar's office. They do the billing and the payments and everything. Um, at this moment, they're going to tell you that they don't know what the costs are going to be, that we can only go off of estimated costs, which is true, which is what your financial aid offer is based off of. It's based off of costs from this academic year. So tuition and fees could go up a little bit. It just depends on when the Board of Trustees meets in the summertime and what our state allocation is and all of that. There's a lot that goes into it, but this is a pretty good estimate of what it will most likely be. What you'll end up doing is you will take whatever your direct net cost, so your tuition and fees, housing and meals if the student's going to live on campus, minus any free money, okay? That's your direct net cost. Divide that into two because we bill per semester, okay? So say it's $20,000, so we're going to divide that into two. It's $10,000 a semester you would end up owing, just as an example. You can do as many as 5 payments on that 10,000, okay? So if you did the 5 payment plan, you would owe $2,000 a month for the first 5 months, and then the next payment plan would start for the spring, and you would owe again $2,000 a month for that. So really, you want to take the total year's cost, divide it into two, and then divide that into five, and that'll give you your payment plan. About how long after the FAFSA was submitted will the financial aid packet come? Um, it shouldn't be too long now at this point. We are offering aid weekly. So it kind of depends on when we get your FAFSA. So if we get it, like if we award on a Thursday and then we get yours on a Friday, you probably won't get one until the following Thursday. So it kind of just depends. You also do have to be an admitted student, in order to receive a financial aid offer. The financial aid packet will be an email. It's sent to you from the Office of Financial Aid at Stockton University. You should also get a text message that provides you with a link to your aid offer as well. The next question is, does the financial aid package outline the total direct and/or indirect costs of attendance? Yes, it will go over your direct costs, your indirect costs, the whole cost of attendance, and then any free money that you're eligible for, as well as other ways to pay those expenses, including direct loans that you're eligible for, and then information on payment plans, scholarships, private loans, and Parent Plus loans as well. I reviewed my financial aid offer and I see that they have my student listed as off campus, but she is on campus. I will call the financial aid office to change that, but will the price change for the better? So if the student received a financial aid offer where it was only tuition and fees, indirect costs, That is because on the admissions application, they didn't indicate that they were interested in living on campus. That's where we're getting that information from. So the cost of attendance and all like the background stuff will change. Um, you can definitely contact us because I would want to see if they do live on campus, they could potentially be eligible for that housing scholarship, depending on if they meet the criteria for it. But that stuff doesn't necessarily matter in terms of that. I would actually recommend using the bill estimator online, which let me see if I can quickly put that link into the chat, because it is a great resource. Like I said, it's not available for fall just yet, but it is a good resource to have, because it does give a pretty good idea of costs. So here's the link for the bill estimator. Um, you can go on there and play around with costs there. And that's honestly what I would recommend doing. Is you can view like estimates of tuition and fees, and then you can pick different housings and what meal plans you may have to have as a result of being in that housing. So you can kind of get a good estimate there, and then you would just subtract the free money on your financial aid offer by yourself from that estimate and then go from there. That'll kind of give you a better idea, especially if the financial aid offer doesn't list that estimate of housing and meals. Do some students not receive anything from financial aid? If by anything you mean um, free money, there are some students that do not receive any free money. Majority of students will receive federal direct loans or the unsubsidized loan. But there are definitely students who do not receive free money. Mine says off campus also, but I will stay on campus and I paid my housing deposit. Then you'll be fine. This isn't an indicator of like whether you can live on campus or not. We just went off of what your admissions application said. So you must have indicated that you were not planning to reside on campus. So that's why I didn't include that. But again, if you'd like, feel free to email me, just so that I can check on your potential eligibility for that scholarship. Is there a way to find out why we were not offered any free money? I can definitely, I mean, we can set up an appointment to kind of discuss that. In terms of free money, though, if you're talking scholarships, I would like you to speak to admissions on the scholarships because we don't determine the eligibility for that. If you're talking grants and things like that, I can definitely go over that with you. It all has to do with income and assets. Unfortunately, and you know, I view FAFSAs and tax returns and things all the time, and what unfortunately is not a lot of money to us, puts a lot of students out of eligibility or the range of eligibility for free money from the federal and state governments. Um, so it's probably something to do with the income and assets on the FAFSA, but I can absolutely take a look for you if you have questions on that. For, you know, any grant funding, any scholarships though, you can email admissions and or call them, and they'll be able to go over that information with you. What is the housing scholarship? Is there a GPA requirement? Yes, the GPA requirement is a 3.0 for first year students, and a 2.75 for transfer students. You also had to indicate that you were planning to reside on campus for on your admissions application. Does the financial aid offer differ in NJ FAMS? NJ FAMS will just tell you if you're eligible for state aid. Your Stockton financial aid offer should include any of that aid that they're saying you're eligible for. If they're saying you're not eligible, then your Stockton financial aid offer won't include any state aid. If a student was admitted into the honors program, is there a scholarship for that? There is not a scholarship specifically for students in the honors program. That is a great thing, though. Congratulations. There's a lot of support and a lot of opportunity within the honors program, but there's not a specific scholarship for it. But it's a great resume booster. On my Go Stockton portal, it says unsatisfied requirement. Complete the free application for federal student aid. But when I click on the link, it directs me to my already submitted but not processed FAFSA. Will the Go Stockton portal update after it is processed, or am I missing something? Yes, it will. So if your FAFSA is not processed, that means that it hasn't been fully submitted. Most likely that's because you're waiting on a parent contributor or something like that. Parent contributors have to finish their sections and submit them in order for your FAFSA to be fully processed. So if that's the case, make sure that your parent submits that. If that's not the case and you're not Okay, my dad just submitted. Okay, thank you for the update. So then yes, within a couple business days, your FAFSA will be processed and then it will be sent to every school listed on the application. My next question is, if we filled out the FAFSA, we're automatically considered for HESA. Would we be eligible for anything via the state? And if so, would we see that in our offer? So you're correct. When you fill out the FAFSA as a New Jersey resident, you are automatically considered for state aid through HESA. They will let the school know, and they'll also put it on your NJ FAMS portal if you are eligible for any state aid. If you don't see anything on your financial aid offer or within your NJ FAMS portal, then you are not eligible for state aid. What if you were offered state aid to other colleges but not Stockton? Is that normal? Um, Yes, that can happen. Stockton is in a bracket, so they're all bracketed off, if you will. So you have your non-publics, you have your four-year publics, you have your research institutions. So if you one of those schools is Rutgers or Rowan, they have a higher allocation. So we talked about that indexing number, that student aid index, right? That's a factor with the state as well. They do their own, and it's called an NJEI. So they have a big chart that they use, and they say this NJEI to this NJEI gets this much. Each school and each group gets their own. So students with a higher NJEI that go to maybe Rutgers or Rowan, like one of those research institutions, they may receive a little bit of state aid because of the way that it's bracketed off. Now, sometimes those schools end up costing a little bit more, so it kind of evens out, but that is possible that you can receive state aid at some New Jersey schools and not others. Also, the privates, like I said, are different. The privates end up costing a little bit more as well, but that it definitely can happen. If I'm a transfer student with my bachelor's degree from a foreign country, is there any opportunity for me with financial aid or scholarships? That's a good question. If you already have a bachelor's degree, there's not really any institutional scholarship eligibility. Um, and it depends on no, even with a bachelor's degree, your citizenship status wouldn't really matter at that point. It would mostly be private scholarships, most likely for you. Um, You could also receive foundation scholarships once you're a Stockton student. But and as far as like receiving any first year transfer scholarships, you wouldn't be eligible for those. And then with a first bachelor's degree, you wouldn't be eligible for any grant funding or anything like that. You could possibly receive loan funding depending on your citizenship status. If you are a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen, which you would have to have like a certain citizenship status to be an eligible non-citizen, you could receive like loan funding and stuff like that for a second bachelor's or a master's degree. I'm not sure exactly which program you'd want to go into. All right, that looks like the end of these questions. Oh, I have one other one. I'm a citizen. What kind of? Okay. So if you're a U.S. citizen, you could file the FAFSA and then you'd be eligible for most likely loan funding as long as you haven't exceeded any limits or anything. But as far as any free money, not pursuing a second bachelor's, only like private scholarships if you utilize, um, the opportunity to apply for those. All right, that's pretty much everything I'm seeing. Oh, I got another one here. And thank you guys for thanking me. I appreciate it. I hope to, give you as much information as I can. And if you have any questions at all, after this presentation, please feel free to reach out to me. I put my email in there for a reason. I'll also put our general financial aid email as well. And I put our financial aid contact us page for appointments and everything. Um, but I just want to make sure you guys have all the information you need. A New Jersey scholarship opportunity somebody's asking about. I'm not sure what scholarship you're referring to. Applying for scholarships as a New Jersey resident, not scholarships. Any Stockton scholarships, New Jersey resident, like if you have to be a New Jersey resident, you'd automatically be considered. And then anything else would be like state funded programs. Those are grant programs that they receive your FAFSA and then you're considered for those there. I don't recall mentioning specifically a New Jersey scholarship, so I'm very sorry. Um, The recording will absolutely be sent, yes, within the next couple of days. I'll have that up on YouTube. I have to put it up there, and then you guys will be able to review it. I'll also put out a survey if you guys feel inclined to fill that out. We appreciate it. Kind of just helps me to prepare better for these presentations or to see what you guys are thinking, what we covered, if we can cover other things, how to get the information to you, all that good stuff. All right. I have another question. If a student receives a loan and it's deferred until after graduation, is there any cost savings if they pay off the loan before it's due? Yes. So federal loans, depending on what type of loan it is, the interest on those loans, if it's subsidized, the interest does not accrue while you're in school. But if it's unsubsidized, the interest will accrue while you're in school. So paying not only that interest, but making payments on that loan, will end up saving you money. The faster you pay off a loan, the faster, or the less money it'll cost you. I'm sorry. So yes, if you can start making payments on loans, absolutely do it while you're in school. If that's something that's, you're not able to do, totally fine. That's why I kind of stressed like the looking for loans with lower interest rates and all that kind of stuff. It's all a balancing and it's not, the same equation won't work for everybody, right? Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it. Um, I'm really glad that you could join, and I'm really glad that I could help answer some of your questions and provide you with some information. So, like I mentioned, I will absolutely send this recording out within the next couple days with a survey. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out and have a great rest of your night. Thanks, guys.